Hello, and it's that time of month again. The time we talk about books. So, in May I read 6 books, which is a pretty good number for me. I don't really have an interesting order to talk about them. I guess I'll just go in order of when I read them. And that means that we start with The Hacienda by Isabel Cañas. Alright, so this one was a thriller or a mystery. I guess it's a thriller. I don't know, whatever. I sometimes don't know the difference, so I just kind of lump them all together in my mind. Actually, most of the books I read this month are kind of weirdly on theme, so. Okay, anyway, sorry. The Hacienda is about a young woman in Mexico, like 2 minutes after the Mexican Revolution, who has married this, like, I don't know, rich guy. And she's basically only done it because her father was a general and he was like assassinated, and it's a little, oh god, I'm like an idiot who doesn't really know that much about Mexican history. So I'm like, yeah, they had a revolution from Spain. I get that. I just didn't fully understand what side her father was on, because my impression was that he was on the side of the rebels, but then they also killed him. So I don't know what the hell was happening. So that's great. I'm very smart. I listened to this book. It's not entirely my fault. No. But anyway, so he's dead. She and her mom have to go live with like her aunt and uncle who really don't like them. So in order to escape, she marries this random rich guy, and she doesn't even really like him. But she's like, yes, I'm gonna have his hacienda to like run, and that's great. Except it turns out the house is like haunted, kind of, and it hates her. And then there's sort of the mystery of like what happened to his first wife. So obviously I'm immediately like, oh boy, it's a gothic story. Like you've got a big evil house, you've got, you know, the dead ex-wife where we don't quite know what happened. I liked it well enough. It was maybe never quite as intense as I hoped it would be. I don't know, but I liked Beatriz, the main character. I liked her well enough, and I also really liked Andres, who was the other main character, who is a priest who also is a witch. Like, I like me a man who's a witch, what can I say? But I don't know, I feel like some of it, okay, I guess if anything fell flat for me, it was just that Andres kept being kind of like, oh, the darkness within me, and I'm like, what are you talking about? like I never fully felt that, you know what I mean? I don't know. Like, I just needed it to be pushed a little further. Like, I mean, really maybe taking a little bit more seriously the fact that this is this guy from like 1820 or whenever, I don't know when the Mexican Revolution was, but around then, right? Who like has gone to train to be a priest in order to better hide the fact that he has magic powers, kind of, and can kind of interact with like spirits and stuff, and all of this was taught to him by his grandmother. But also like does he genuinely think he's gonna go to hell? Like, I'm a little bit like confused. So there was something there though that was almost really interesting. But I liked it. It was kind of wild, and you know, it was a cool setting, and it was interesting. It did some stuff. What am I saying? And for some reason it seems like, I mean, I'm looking at this list of books and I'm like, I was really just reading a lot of like mystery, thriller, darker stuff this month, and I'm not mad about it. So next, I read Let Me Go by Chelsea Cain. Oh my god, how do I even begin to talk about this book? Okay, so Let Me Go is book 6 of a 6-book series about this. I have talked about it before, but it's about this this cop or detective who was trying to catch a serial killer for like 10 years, and then she actually kidnaps him and tortures him, and he does like briefly die, and then like she cuts out his spleen and mails it to somebody. Like, it's fucked up. But the series starts 2 years after that, and he, you know, is looking for a different serial killer, and also she's in prison, and they have this fucked up relationship. So book 6, you know, naturally some time has passed since the beginning, and as far as the ending of a story, I found it a bit disappointing. Although weirdly, like, I was looking into it when I finished because I'm like, this does not feel like the ending to a series. And the author was like, oh yeah, I'm planning on writing more. And it was just like 10 fucking years ago. She never did. And I think she's still out there somewhere. So like, Chelsea Cade, please continue the series. I wanted to like actually resolve. Because like, I had assumed the whole time that it was intended to be 6 books and that like there was going to be more of a wrapping up at the end, and then there just kind of wasn't. And I was like, God damn it. I mean, but I have really liked the series. I've liked seeing Archie heal, I guess, from all of that, and like his relationship with Gretchen changing over time, to the point where he does not have to constantly be visiting her and obsessed with her and stuff. This book was wild. What happened in it? What was the plot of this book? No, but really. Well, there's this kind of ongoing thing where there's this character who's been working for years, this like, for his father's like illegal like drug, etc. organization, you know. But he's been feeding information to the FBI, and that's kind of coming to a head in this book because it seems like some stuff is going down with that. Simultaneously, it turns out that they've got a serial killer who's been killing people in like their basement. I don't know. That's not what it was, but this girl goes missing and then gets murdered at this party that everybody's at, who is at this like drug kingpin guy's house. And also Gretchen was there because it's Archie's birthday / also Halloween. Is his birthday on Halloween? It's like really close. They're close together. And she wanted to, you know, show up and torment him a bit. Actually, it was really interesting juxtaposed with another book I read later in the month. Vis-a-vis the way that they treat Archie after they find out that Gretchen has been at the party. Because like, this is all I care about, so I'm going to talk about it. So there's this, so he like is drugged and ends up, you know, blacking out and spending, you know, several hours unconscious, and he's not even remember what happened. So when he wakes up, he's like in a completely different place on the island. He's like, what the fuck? So later they get like CCTV. I've been reading too much Sherlock fanfiction. No, they get like surveillance camera footage, and it turns out, yeah, Gretchen was there, and she basically like, I mean, she essentially sexually assaults him, but they never say that in the book, and I was losing my mind over it. I was like, hi, hello? Like, I understand that she didn't touch him, but he was unconscious, and she was like basically jerking off over his face. And he did end up with hair in his throat as a result. And he was like, where the fuck did this come from? So anyway, it was disturbing because then they kind of do like a, not a rape kit because that's not really what happened, but like, you know, like a trying to get evidence off of him kind of thing. It was interesting because one of the other books I read has a similar scene. And I was just like, what is this, the theme for the month? Okay. Fucking anyway. So there's a lot of weirdness. I always feel like the interesting thing about these books is just the dark, fucked up sexual stuff that happens in them. And so, God, in this book, it was like I was just like, okay, because there's a couple of scenes. One's a flashback, one's like currently happening kind of stuff, where Archie is like in a sexual situation with somebody. And it just seems so often that whether it's Gretchen or somebody else, they'll kind of be like, oh, we're gonna do this thing. And he'll be like, I don't know about that, kind of. But they do it anyway, and he's uncomfortable, but it's fine. I'm like, what? Can someone just, I don't know. Can Archie just live? And then I was like, is he gonna end up with Susan? Where is that going? And it didn't really go anywhere. So that's why I wanted to write more of the series. I'm like, can we just actually complete it? Maybe. All right, so that book was not worth that much talking, but let's move on. let's actually stay with the crime and shit, and we'll talk about the book that doesn't fit into it at the end. So, Our Kind of Traitor by John le Carré. Okay. This is another audiobook. I love John le Carré, and it's been, well, I think I read one of his books last year, probably. So I was like, it's time to read another one. And this is one of the few that I had access to an audiobook for. So, Our Kind of Traitor, I have like a long history with this book because back in grad school I read like half of it and then I never finished it. Unreal how few books I read when I was in grad school. I mean, it makes sense, but like, I just think on it and I'm like, how did I have this book for like weeks and weeks? To the point where the library was like, okay, you can't renew this anymore, give it back. And that's why I never finished it. I'm like, how? It's not even long. All right, anyway. But now I have finally read the whole book. Obviously I had to start from the beginning because I didn't remember much. It was interesting. I feel like I say that about every book and I never give the evidence to support that. Okay, but this one is about a vacationing couple of British people who meet a Russian oligarch at this tennis club in Antigua where they are on this vacation. And, you know, it's because like the guy plays tennis, so they play tennis, but this Russian guy wants revenge on people who are higher up in his like crime organization and who killed this like dear friend, mentee, etc. of his, and he wants to get his family out and he wants to get revenge. And so by selling their secrets to the British. And so he's using this couple as intermediaries because they're British, basically. And that's essentially what it's about. I found the ending a little unsatisfying because, I mean, like with most of le Carré's books, the ending is not exactly happy. But I was kind of like, okay, I understand what happens to Dima, but what about all the other characters? Like, does his family get to England? Like, did I black out for a sentence and I just don't remember what they said? I have this problem with audiobooks though, where I just like don't always pick up all the information. So maybe it's in the book, I don't know. But I was just like, oh, okay. Well, I want to know what happens, you know? I want to know. And I'm never gonna. But, you know, otherwise it was a fine book. It was like typical John le Carré. He crafts characters and their histories and their lives in an interesting way. So I guess it was fine. Okay, let's talk about a library book that I happen to still have, Any Man by Amber Tamblyn. This book's fucked up. Okay, this is the one I was talking about before. It is about there's a serial rapist who is attacking men. She is a woman. And she is very violent, and the whole thing is told, though, it's sort of epistolary, not fully, though, like, it's almost in vignettes. I mean, okay, because some of it is, like, diary entries, and some of it is transcript of a, like, podcast, but then other parts are definitely more internal monologue, or just a list of things, or a whole bunch of Twitter tweets, yeah. So it's not entirely epistolary, but it's close. This book is like, it's kind of fucked up. And it didn't fully give me what I wanted. Like, I spent, you know, just like when I was finished with it, and I read it really fast, I was like, goddamn, I want more of these characters. Like, I want to spend more time with them. I want to see them through other people's eyes. I want to, like, have maybe just a more solid, regular mystery book about this, where there's actually the possibility that they catch the bad guy, which, like, okay, spoilers, but they don't catch her. 10 years pass, and she just kind of, at 10 years pass, she ends up returning to, I think, New York at the end, and just, you have this bit from her where she's just like, yep, cool, and is maybe gonna do it again if she feels like it. It's pretty fucked up, like, not just because it's about a serial rapist, but also there are added violent elements involved. And each case, like each person that she attacks, she does something different and fucked up. I did think it was good. It wasn't entirely what I want that story to be, but I think that it did a good job with like what it was doing. I think I would probably call it a horror novel more than a mystery, because there isn't really a mystery. I mean, I guess there's the mystery of like, hello, what the fuck? But it doesn't get solved, so that's not really what it's about, right? Yeah. And obviously trigger warning for like a whole bunch of shit. Not just rape. Some other stuff as well. But, God. What was the most disturbing thing? I mean, we don't need to get into that, but like, it's the kind of thing very, very specifically that I like. So I liked this book. I think that the Twitter thread was what made me the saddest. Cause, I mean, if you've read the book, you know what I'm talking about. Yeah, so that sucked. Also, God, the part where the guy in prison, Ezra, is telling his story, and I'm reading it like, okay, wait, how old are you, bruh? And it's like, oh, he was 10. Okay. Yeah. It's pretty wild. Okay, let's move on to book 5. The Crime of the Century. The Leopold and Loeb Case by Hal Higdon. This is my book. Okay, so this is nonfiction, clearly. And it's also a book that I have wanted to read for a long time. It belonged to my dad, and I stole it from my parents' house when they were selling everything and moving. So, it is mine now. I mean, I stole it. They know I have it. Because I was always like, I really do want to read this. And so I finally did. And you know what? It was good. It was also a little weird because this is a murder. Okay, back up. This is a very Chicago specific thing where in Hyde Park in the 1920s, in fact, 99 years ago, 2 young men murdered a boy. They all lived in Kenwood. And they were all from these rich Jewish families, and they were all like well educated, very intelligent, and it was just a weird time. So that is what this is about. Another kind of odd thing, just coincidentally, because it was in 1924, 99 years ago, this book was published in the 70s. So he kept talking about how it had been 50 years. So I just thought that was interesting that I'm reading it 50 years after he wrote the book about the thing that happened 50 years before the book. Okay, got it. So I don't know if there are elements to this story that this book does not contain. All of the relevant people are dead by this time this book was written. So there might be, but there might not be. I mean, it's not like there are elements of the mystery that will never be solved, and there are also elements that, you know, were solved. So I don't know what really could be different. I think that if somebody writing a book about this today might address some of the elements differently, but I think they would also be there, you know? I feel like the biggest mystery that will never be solved is at what point did Bobby Franks actually die? Because if the killers had any real idea, they never said. And it was unclear from the autopsy, because there was just some weird shit where he was like, oh, he hasn't gone into rigor mortis yet. And I'm like, he's definitely been, I mean, I'm pretty sure he's been dead long enough that he would have just stopped being in rigor mortis. I don't know. The book goes into that and is like, this is weird. So, yeah. It was good though. It was written in an interesting way. Like, I don't know. It was easy to read. He really talked about a lot of stuff. It's also got weird sex shit in it. Fortunately, none of which seems to have involved the victim, so that's probably good, right? Although, again, that's another thing we'll never fully know, right? But anyway, yeah, it's a sad story and a strange story, and also Clarence Darrow was their defense attorney, so that's also fun and odd. Here's all their houses. They don't exist anymore. I think one of them might still, but I'm not sure. Look at their big fancy fucking Kenwood houses, man. All right, so yeah, just kind of obscure book, kind of, I don't know. And I'm really glad I finally read it, because I feel like I learned a lot, and also just that bit of Chicago history, you know, it's just so strange to be like, oh, and then they went to fucking Jackson Park, and you're like, oh, I've been there. You know, I always get a kick out of that kind of thing. Okay, so the one of the houses that's gone had this low wall around the property. I'm not sure which house, but it might have been the Loeb mansion, because, well, it's got a wall in the picture anyway here. And the wall is still there. So I have seen it, because every once in a while my family would be in Hyde Park for whatever reason, and then of course at some point Dad would be like, we have to drive around and look at all of the things, which would naturally include him being like, and here's another place where we used to live, and here's another place. But anyway, like, that's not Kenwood though. Kenwood is where the big rich people houses are, or at least were. I guess they're still there, but they're not really kept up because it's just so expensive to keep up a house like that, right? Anyway, rambling. So let's talk about the one book I read this month that wasn't about murder and death. And that was Green Mars by Kim Stanley Robinson. The second book in the Mars trilogy. And I thought, you know, it's about goddamn time I continue that. So, Green Mars was great. It really was. It was just like continuing the story. The whole series is about the terraforming of Mars and the colonization, I guess you could say, of Mars. And I'm getting a kick out of it. It's a great series. It was an interesting book. All the characters, like, I love how much time he spends describing the geography of Mars, but also, they don't call it geography, it's areography, but anyway, the you know, just the landscape, but also like all of the different groups of people. I love the parts where all the different kind of underground areas and like groups come together for their little conference thing, and it's just such a interesting, diverse group of like philosophies and ways of living and ideas about the future. It follows a lot of the same characters from Red Mars. Some of those characters are dead, but you already know that going into this, right? So one of the things in Red Mars was that they discover this way of prolonging life. So it's been like, by some point in this book, it's been 100 years since the first colonists like arrived on the planet, but they're still alive. 39 of them, I think, at that point, by the end of this book, are still alive. So like, some have died, but not of old age, right? Like, there was a lot of violence in Red Mars that resulted in a bunch of people dying, but the rest of them are still kicking, and they're all old as fuck, but they don't look it entire. I mean, they look old, but they don't look 150 or whatever, right? Like, because they'd be dead. So they're not, and so they don't look that old. What am I saying? It's a good book. I, again, don't really know what book 3 will do. This book did introduce some new characters, so I'm thinking, you know, they'll get even more focused in the third book. But it was great, and you know, maybe in some ways refreshing, because it didn't involve murder and terrible crimes against people. I mean, it did a little bit, but it also involved like just some wild shit. So they're trying to, you know, who's going to be in charge of Mars, and everything on Earth is falling apart. Oh my God, there was this crazy part where like this volcano goes off in Antarctica, and so this whole like, maybe, what is it, like Western Antarctic like ice sheet is going to fall into the ocean and melt, and the ocean, and it's not like a climate change thing. Like, climate change is a thing, but this is like a disaster which is happening right now because of this volcano, and then it's like, oh, the level of the Earth is going to rise like 6 meters, which is an absurd amount, you know, and is going to flood all of these coastal cities, which is like so many cities. I mean, you know, and there's always this part of me that's like, well, I'm sitting pretty in the Midwest where nothing bad ever happens. It makes me think of this Prairie Home Companion joke where he talked about climate change and like the rising oceans and everything, and was like, everybody move to Minnesota. We're nowhere near an ocean. So It's a little like that. But anyway, it's obviously disturbing. But it affects the political situation on Mars because they're like, okay, they're all kind of distracted now. This is the time to make our move. It's great. It's a great book. Yeah. I think Nadia and Sax are probably my favorite characters, if you care. But Anne I'm always like, I want an Anne chapter because she's just so interesting. Like it's always just all about like the rocks, of Mars and like all their different philosophies of what Mars should be like when they're done and whether they should just leave it alone or change it a lot or whatever. And oh man, the Sax stuff was so interesting this book because he wants to get back into doing like terraforming, but they're all kind of wanted, so he gets a fake identity and he gets his face changed a bit so that he can kind of pretend to be some other guy and go work, and then like eventually then the whole fucking thing was Phyllis and they find out who he is and then they torture him for information, which that happens off page, so we don't fully know how that went down, but it caused him to, I think, have a stroke, and then he has aphasia, and then he has to learn how to like talk again. It's like a whole thing. I liked that a lot. Anyway, and a lot of stuff also about the plants that are on Mars. So it's green Mars because it's still cold enough that the water is frozen until the end of the book. But the plants that they've been engineering to live on Mars are indeed growing, and they've even got little tiny trees. But it's mostly like lichens and just all sorts of kind of arid, like little plants. But it's just so cool. It's so cool. And I love it. So, yeah. I mean, that's it. 6 books. They were all pretty good. I would say my favorite, my least favorite was probably Our Kind of Traitor. Because I was just kind of like, okay, this is happening. But it was fine. I'm not sure what I would say my favorite was. I gave a lot of 4 stars, but for really different reasons. So, yeah, I would say none of these books are ones that I'm like, wow, this is my favorite. So, like, Green Mars might be it, but they all, like, did something for me, you know? So, that's great. Okay. Also, I'll see you when I see you. Yeah. I'll try to read maybe a little bit more variety in June. I have plans for June. And they involve a little bit less sex and murder, but maybe not a lot. We'll see. Anyway, bye.